In Latin America, governments have historically been much more open about reports of so-called unidentified aerial phenomena. And as you're about to see, there's a heck of a lot to report.
In March of 2004, a Mexican Air Force surveillance plane patrols along the Gulf of Mexico. On the lookout for drug smugglers, its infrared camera instead captures this startling footage. A string of glowing orbs. The video lasts for almost a minute, and here you can see 11 of those orbs seeming to fly in formation. When the plane turns to follow, the objects seem to disappear. The camera operator declares that whatever it was he's filmed, it's 100% real. The Mexican Secretary of Defense releases the video so that the scientific community can study it. MJ Banayas, a journalist who covers the unexplained, has looked into the incident.
When this sighting was first made public, a lot of people within the UFO community got very excited about UFOs operating in fleets.
These orbs are reminiscent of those Foo Fighters seen by World War II pilots. They also look similar to another Mexican UFO we've reported on before. This glowing object, which Captain Eric Delgado recorded in 2020, as it tracked his cargo plane for 20 minutes in the airspace above Monterey.
That is phenomenal, man. Look at that.
Strangely, that orb never showed up on Delgado's collision avoidance system or air traffic control's radar.
There's weather about 40 miles off our left wingtip where this thing seems to have disappeared. I guess now I can definitively say we are not alone.
Something similar was reported with this Mexican Air Force incident. The crew of the surveillance plane counted 11 objects, but only 3 showed up on the plane's radar. For years, this video has sparked hot debate, so we turned it over to our team of experts.
Mick West is a forensic video analyst who looks for any tampering with the footage. His conclusion?
This is a real video of UFOs. It was taken by the Mexican military and verified as being a real thing.
Which brings us to the challenge of identifying those glowing objects. Astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio considers the most obvious answer.
There's a theory that this is maybe a fleet of aircraft being flown by drug smugglers, but these objects never distance themselves from each other. I think drug smugglers are probably not championship formation flying pilots like the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. You know, one plane will go up higher, one come lower, so I don't think that these are other aircraft.
West considers a string of other theories, including a mysterious natural phenomenon, orbs of light known as ball lightning.
Ball lightning is very, very rare, and it normally just occurs one at a time and doesn't last very long. So I think the likelihood of this being a whole bunch of ball lightning all at once is extraordinarily low.
What about space junk?
A rocket disintegrating, you would see up in the air. This is something that are looking basically horizontal out of the horizon. So space junk is not really a good explanation.
So the objects don't move like space junk. In fact, West thinks they might not be moving at all. Plotting the plane's location, West calculates that its camera was pointed out over the Gulf of Mexico.
If we look at a map of the region, we can see there's a whole bunch of oil wells, which usually have some kind of flare on the top. So perhaps what they were seeing were the flares from these platforms.
But it seems clear the objects are moving, right?
Just above the horizon, you're poking up these little oil wells. And here's some kind of dummy clouds, which I've put in. And if we move the camera to the left, it looks like the oil rigs are moving past the clouds. So it's an illusion of motion.
But even West admits his theory isn't 100% certain. Digging deeper, we found out the oil wells are almost 100 miles from the plane, making it unlikely they'd show up on thermal camera. And another crucial detail. You see the flickering flames from the oil wells? In the alleged UFOs, no flickering.
So, oil wells or something stranger? We're calling this a sighting of genuine UFOs. And the similarities with the orb recently reported by Captain Delgado are striking. 17 years after this video was shot, the Mexican government, just like us, is still looking for answers.
It's July 2019, about 100 miles off the California coast. U.S. warships are engaged in military exercises. And according to the ship's logs, they're also being harassed by, quote, unmanned aerial vehicles of unknown origin. Reporters uncover the story in April of 2021. And things get really wild when filmmaker Jeremy Corbell releases this. Night vision footage recorded on a destroyer, the USS Russell, picks up a trio of objects that seem to fly overhead. The largest one is blinking. Whoever shot this video thinks the objects are important enough to leak the footage to the public. Let's slow it down and zoom in, because there's something else worth pointing out here. The objects are triangle or pyramid shaped, and that's significant.
Starting in the mid-1970s, we began seeing a rise of sightings concerning UFOs that appeared to be triangular in shape. This was pushed a lot more forward into the late 80s, early 90s.
There have been a string of triangle UFO sightings, including one over Belgium in 1990, and a famous incident in the skies over Phoenix, Arizona on March 13, 1997. One thing that's different about the USS Russell triangles, they were filmed during military maneuvers, which always attract a lot of unwanted attention.
It's very possible that the Chinese would be using drones to surveil American naval ships in the Pacific Ocean. It's very much part of their intelligence mandate. The fact that the Navy did confirm that this video was used in their intelligence reports is compelling. However, we need to be very clear. We don't know if this is a foreign power. We don't know, as some people have speculated, if they're otherworldly.
Unlike other famous Navy videos, this footage was not shot on a military-grade camera, which would provide crucial metadata. But our experts think there's enough here for a thorough analysis anyway. Let's see what they come up with.
Tim McMillan has reported extensively on unexplained naval encounters with devices of unknown origin. He's doubtful this could be a secret triangle-shaped American military craft.
I think that people are probably very familiar with the B-2 stealth bomber or the retired F-117 stealth plane, but they're actually delta wing. They are not perfectly triangular like what we're seeing here. It's not an aerodynamic shape, and there isn't any perfectly triangular aircraft that we're aware of anywhere in the world.
It's definitely not one of our stealth fighters. Mick West wonders if they might be natural objects.
So what I did was I took the video, I overlaid it on a star map here. So we have Jupiter down here and the other stars down here. They're all lined up. Took the video. And then I moved the video, and one little star appears over here. Matches up quite nicely. And if we keep going, the video ends up right here. And there's two stars in that exact spot.
West thinks stars might explain two of the three objects, but what about the third? And why is it pyramid-shaped? Mark D'Antonio looks for clues in the camera work.
In the video, you see this flagpole type thing that's sticking up. Well, that's in focus, but everything past it is not.
West wonders if what's happening is a phenomenon known as bokeh. When the camera is out of focus, light from a distant object will hit the camera sensor in the shape of the aperture.
It's filmed by somebody holding up their phone camera to a night vision binocular. This is a night vision binocular, and this is actually one that has a triangular aperture. Then you would get these triangular shapes.
An out-of-focus camera with a triangle-shaped iris, that could explain how this image was made, but importantly, it still doesn't explain what it was filming. For D'Antonio, the flashing light stands out.
7, 8. I'm counting the blinks, 9. And they were flashing at 1 flash per second. Now that's 60 flashes per minute. 60 flashes per minute is the strobe frequency that you can see on aircraft.
Yes, the green pyramid is flashing at the FAA's required frequency. And the odds of an alien spacecraft coincidentally flashing at the exact same rate seem pretty low.
So, our verdict on this video. Two of the objects are almost definitely out-of-focus stars, and the third is most likely a commercial plane.
It's a video that got a lot of attention this year, but in this case, it's no UFO. We call them as we see them. August 15th, 1950, Great Falls, Montana. Baseball coach Nick Mariana is out scouting a new ball field accompanied by his secretary. He's brought along a 16mm film camera, but what catches his eye isn't the field. It's in the sky above it. We zoom in and focus on what Mariana sees. The 11-second clip captures two silver objects appearing to fly in tandem across the Montana sky.
This video is particularly interesting to me, mainly because this was before satellites crowded our sky. So seeing some light traveling across the sky was a very unusual event.
Take a closer look. Are these illuminated orbs Tic Tacs? Compare them to the Nimitz footage on the right. We know they're not an artifact in the film or a flaw in the camera lens because they move behind this water tower here.
What we're looking at here potentially could be the very first UFO video ever captured.
Mariana's incident occurred during the UFO craze of the late 40s and early 50s. It began when Kenneth Arnold first reported seeing strange objects fly into Mount Rainier in 1947, coining the term flying saucer. And it hit a fever pitch after the Roswell incident in New Mexico that same year, which has since become a touchstone of pop culture. But what's striking here is that Mariana later described the objects as silver spinning discs, much like what may have crashed in the New Mexico desert, depending on who you ask about Roswell.
The initial report was that the military had found a flying disc, so it was picked up by newspapers across the country. Then, pretty much immediately, they retracted their story and said it was a weather balloon. And the change in the story led some people to think that there was a little something fishy going on.
Many believe the Roswell incident is a cover-up.
Nick Mariana was so convinced he'd filmed a UFO, he reached out to the U.S. Air Force to report the incident. They examined his footage. Now it's time for our experts to do so as well.
With today's technology, it's quite easy to insert UFOs into digital video. Like this one over Miami we judged to be a fake last year.
What the is that? Wait, bye.
And he instantly says, okay, bye, and then he pans away from it. It's very strange. I would expect that an operator doesn't simply move away after they see something like that. They stay focused on it.
This video was clearly faked.
But back in 1950, Nick Mariana didn't have the computer technology needed to doctor a video. That makes a big difference.
This 11-second film was captured on 16mm film, which makes it almost impossible to doctor. Whatever we're seeing here was captured in camera in the moment.
So we can rule out that this was a hoax. But the Air Force told Mariana that what he'd recorded was two F-94 fighter jets flying near Great Falls at the time. Maybe that's the case, and maybe not.
There's controversy because the jets were known to be in a very different area than here.
The explanation that this was, what appears to be the reflection off of the F-94 jets. One problem with that is anybody who's looked up in the sky and seen the sun reflecting off of a plane recognizes that as the plane's in motion, where the sun is relative to that, that's going to change that reflection a little bit. It can cause flickering, it can cause it to dim.
For physics buffs, this phenomenon is called the law of reflection. When a ray of light strikes a silvery or mirrored surface, it's reflected away from the surface at the same angle. So if you move that mirrored surface, the reflection shifts with it.
And suddenly you can clearly see an aircraft. But in this instance, we see a consistent light source. That would be more consistent with something that is actually, displaying light itself rather than reflecting light from an exterior source. It certainly doesn't appear to be F-94 jets.
So McMillan is confident the craft are emitting light, not reflecting it. But maybe there is some other explanation. In the past, we've seen that some kinds of birds can be mistaken for UFOs. Is that the case here?
I don't believe that is in the cards here because the tower is a couple hundred feet or more from Nick Mariana, and then beyond that are these objects. They're moving so fast that they'd have to be very, very, very fast birds.
In a dive, falcons can reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour, but these objects are moving horizontally, and the fastest birds, like ducks, are closer to the 70-mile-an-hour range. Whatever Mariana filmed appears to be flying several times that speed.
So it just doesn't fit. If they were jets, it would be relatively simple to show that they were jets, and no one would hide the fact. So how come we don't know the answer?
So our verdict on the Mariana film. There's room for debate here, but the Air Force's explanation isn't doing it for us. So we're gonna call this a genuine UFO. One thing's for sure, we've come a long way since 1950, both in the technology we use to document UFOs and also our government's attitude about reporting them, even if it can't say what they are.
It's 1994 at the Nevada Test and Training Range. It's used for flight tests, aerial gunnery, even nuclear tests. Today, an Air Force tracking station in the desert is monitoring the airspace above the top secret site when its remote-controlled cameras capture something that has no business being there.
I don't know. We acquired this unknown object, aircraft some type. It seems to be hovering there.
These 12 minutes of video were captured by remote-controlled cameras from the Nellis Air Force Base. And what they show you is fascinating.
The video was shot with a camera that amplifies the light from the stars and the moon to make it appear almost as bright as day. You can see in the time code that it was 11:21 p.m. That's the moon causing the bright lens flare while the operators zoom in on the object.
It appears to be a craft of undefined shape and origin that's moving erratically in a pattern that wouldn't be explained by the aircraft technology available at the time.
The readout in the upper right of the frame measures the object's distance from the camera.
We'll call this a kill on his unknown aircraft. T1 control doesn't know what type of aircraft it is either.
The object moves slowly above the horizon and then soars upward.
This object doesn't appear to have any wings or rotor blades, and it appears to change shape in flight.
Yeah, it's moving fast. Did we stop it? Standby 13.
Now here's what takes the weird to that other level. Within the Nevada Test and Training Range is a high-security area whose name has become synonymous with UFO theory, Area 51.
Area 51 is a military base. The military didn't actually acknowledge that it existed until the 2000s, I want to say. And many in the UFO community believe that it's a hotspot for testing on alien technology. So when it actually was confirmed to exist, it was a really big deal.
But here's the thing. If this was some top secret tech, domestic or alien, being flown out of Area 51, you'd think the operators would know something about what's going on. Instead, they sound completely confused, which suggests that whatever this is didn't have the clearance to be there. So what are we really looking at? Let's hand this over to our experts.
The object moves erratically in the sky, which suggests it's not an aircraft that we knew about at the time, such as a helicopter or a jet. The way it's moving is almost the way a drone would move, but drones didn't exist when this was captured.
So the object's movement rules out known aircraft, as does its odd shape. Let's zoom in. There's no sign of an engine or an exhaust trail.
That leads me to believe that what we're looking at here is powered potentially by cold gas thrusters, a technology that wasn't necessarily as well understood at the time, but it could be an early prototype for a modern drone.
Could it be that the tracking station picked up some kind of classified military project being researched in nearby Area 51?
Anytime you're doing really classified testing, you turn off your tracking cameras. So the fact that this was captured and recorded is very intriguing. All of that is inconsistent with what we'd expect with actual classified aerospace testing.
But Mick West takes a closer look. He doesn't think the object is moving much at all.
Whenever you see it moving and you can see something like a hill in the background, you'll see they both move together. So all the motion that we have in this particular video is just the motion of the camera. It's not really moving very rapidly in the scene, And it's not really turning or making any very abrupt moves. It's just kind of gently seeming to drift along and gently rotate.
Mark D'Antonio sees it the same way.
All the fast movements you see here are the camera itself moving to re-engage with the object and to see it. But it's not the object moving quickly. If you study the sky background and if you look at what is going on, you'll notice that the camera's doing all the moving.
And that leads both D'Antonio and West to a very earthly explanation.
It looks like a bunch of balloons, which is, an odd thing that you might not expect to see on a military training range, but there are small towns nearby. Someone could have just had a party and some balloons got loose, or it could have been something that they were experimenting with.
There have been balloon targets used before. Maybe this is what we're seeing here, but the folks on the base, they certainly weren't expecting this.
This is unfortunately a case where we may never know what this object actually was, because this is the type of thing that the military either forgets about or they don't tell you about.
So based on that further observation of the object's motion and shape, we're going to say that this was some kind of balloon that meandered into the high-security airspace. But this incident was not mentioned in the government's recent UFO report. So what the Pentagon thinks of this remains a mystery.
Took off, booking it.
This leaked footage, obtained by filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, comes from inside the ship's Combat Information Center. It shows a sphere-like object flying near the ship in windy and choppy conditions.
Break Omaha, pick me kid, Rafael Peralta, passability to launch Hilo ASAP.
Whoa, it's getting close.
This is happening the same month the Green Pyramid footage was shot on board the USS Russell, another ship participating in these exercises. The Omaha is concerned enough to prepare to launch a helicopter when the object appears to dive into the ocean.
Whoa, splashed. Mark bearing and range.
Unconfirmed reports say the Omaha and a nearby submarine proceeded to search the water for signs of the object, but found nothing. The crucial element in this video is the plunging into the ocean, classifying this as a so-called transmedium UFO, an object that appears to possess amphibious capabilities. In other words, a USO, an unidentified submerged object.
This is a belief based on data, based on what other navies, including our own, have seen in the ocean. So it's possible that these unknown objects are playing cat and mouse with our own submarines.
USOs have been documented by the U.S. Navy for decades, including the famous Aguadilla incident off the coast of Puerto Rico in 2013. In that case, a DEA plane recorded this footage of an object circling the airport, then heading out to sea and entering the water at high speed, then re-emerging. One theory posits that ETs are either exploring the Earth's oceans as well as its skies, or that perhaps they have underwater bases we're unaware of.
Maybe alien life forms could have made it to us, and if they got here, where would they go? They know we're intelligent. So they would go where we are not. And where we are not is in the deep ocean.
Some say that's what Legends of Atlantis were about all along, an alien base for USOs. But it's important to note that all reported transmedium objects are not identical. For example, the Aguadilla footage from 2013 showed the object apparently emerging from the water and then splitting in two. In contrast, the more recent object seen on the Omaha just splashes down and disappears. No reemergence, no splitting, at least not on camera. So maybe this thing can be explained after all. Let's find out.
Could it be a parachute flare? Unlikely, as it's moving across the water horizontally. A weather balloon. No material was recovered in a search of the area, and a balloon would not lose its infrared heat signature that fast upon hitting the water.
We can see it maneuver from right to left. We can see it ascend abruptly. All of that is pretty inconsistent with any types of balloons, whether it's even an atmospheric testing balloon, that type of thing. If it's moving lighter than air, it's going to be carried by wind currents, but it's not going to have a propulsion system. There's not going to be a thrust that sends it into different directions.
You notice it moves across the water with some speed. A balloon wouldn't be moving across the water at high speed just to stop. So it's not a balloon, in my view.
Unlikely it's a plane. The object has no wings, and because it was captured on a thermal camera, we can see that its temperature is even on all surfaces. If it were a jet, it would appear much hotter at the rear exhaust nozzle. How about a drone, launched by an adversary trying to gather intel on our aerial defense capabilities?
It takes a large drone that's about the size of a plane to sustain flight time for hours. But these evidently were up in the air for hours, plaguing the ships. And the Navy says they still can't identify them.
If it was a drone, were they trying to tease the US military? They wouldn't give away technology like that. They wouldn't let on that they had this technology. They haven't shot at it, they haven't done anything to it whatsoever. Yet it's falling and eventually landing in the water.
But what about when it hits the water? Even if a drone split apart on impact, you'd still expect the pieces to show up in the thermal image. Instead, it just seems to disappear.
This object went into the water where any other type of aircraft, there should have been a crash, there should have been some debris. However, none was found.
So we've ruled out almost every possible earthly explanation. But we have to seriously consider that this object might have been a foreign military asset. On the other hand, how likely is it that the US military would be unable to identify such objects no matter how sophisticated they might be? Like the government, we're calling this a genuine UFO. But the report's vagueness leaves the topic wide open for further debate. That's why the UFO community is now clamoring for further disclosure, especially about those other 141 incidents that haven't been made public.
October 2018, Hohhot, the industrial capital of Inner Mongolia. The city of 2.8 million is going about its business when this tears across the sky. A large, bright object corkscrews overhead, leaving a breathtaking trail. Startled citizens all over the city begin filming. It looks like some sort of vapor swirling in the sky. And at one point, right here, it looks like a beam shining down on the city.
This thing, whatever it was extremely strange looking. So you kind of can't blame people for looking up and thinking, it's an alien spaceship.
Of course, a rocket launch is the obvious explanation. But hang on, rocket launches don't usually happen over large, densely populated areas. Their contrails aren't typically illuminated like this one. And importantly, they usually have linear flight trajectories, not this weird corkscrewing path.
It doesn't seem to be going anywhere specific. It seems to kind of be meandering throughout the sky.
That raises another theory. Might this be the debut of a breakthrough military technology?
One explanation that has been posited is that they come from the Dongfang Aerospace City, where they are creating new types of technology, space-age technology, and that they are the result of an effort to give China a leg up in the space race.
There's a lot of mystery surrounding this particular area, and no one has come forward to claim responsibility, so we don't actually know what happened here.
The Chinese military keeps a tight lid on what's happening at Dongfang. Foreigners are rarely allowed to visit. But we do know the Chinese admitted to using a missile to destroy one of their own satellites back in 2007. So is this video proof of some new advanced space weapon? Is it a craft from out of this world, or something else entirely?
Astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio first considers that this might be a comet.
Oh, this is cool. We talk about comets in the night sky all the time. And comets do move across the sky.
But known comets are astronomical objects millions of miles away.
They take days, if not weeks, to move across the sky. This is moving across the sky in a matter of seconds. So, is it a comet that's very close to the Earth? If it was that close to the Earth, it would probably envelop the entire Earth. This glow would be everywhere.
So we can rule out that theory. As for a UFO, in general, one of their defining characteristics is an unknown means of propulsion, like the famous Tic Tac video from 2004.
In a lot of the truly unexplained UFO videos that we see, we don't see the characteristics that you have in this video. Namely, all of this exhaust trail that you're seeing here.
That massive exhaust trail brings us back to the rocket theory, but there's some explaining to do. First, that illumination. How can it be a rocket if it doesn't look like night launches in the US? McMillan has a theory based on the time of day.
These videos were filmed roughly an hour after sunset. And so what you're seeing is the rocket itself is above and high enough altitude with the curvature of the Earth that the sun is actually still reflecting light off of the exhaust trail.
Okay, but what about that bizarre corkscrewed flight path?
So whatever the object is, you can see it's changing trajectory. Could this be some type of classified or experimental rocket testing? Possibly we're looking at some kind of GPS, laser-guided, some type of rocket system that is targeting something, potentially moving. You can see these patterns in something like Israel's Iron Dome system, which is designed to seek out rockets as an air defense measure. That's also on the table.
But hang on. McMillan says the fact that this happened over a highly populated area opens up another, less impressive possibility.
So it certainly appears that we have something that has gone awry, and it's not traveling the path that it was intended. The idea that it could be a failed rocket system is certainly plausible.
Our verdict here? This was a Chinese rocket, but what it was and whether this video captured a failed launch or a success, we can't say. If the Chinese launched at night to keep it secret, well, we can safely say that didn't work. One thing is certain, the new space race is underway, and the Chinese government is building its own space station. So we are sure to hear more about their ambitions in the coming years.
An enigmatic radio broadcast that no one claims to run has been transmitting a monotonous droning sound like this one, virtually non-stop for over 5 decades. The buzzing is occasionally interrupted by a voice speaking Russian. Ryan Schaum, an amateur radio enthusiast, runs one of many websites devoted to the phenomenon.
What originally got me into the buzzer was the mystery of it, like who's broadcasting this, why they are, and what possible purpose could it have. I did kind of get hooked to it, so I just keep on searching for more information about it, hoping to find some sort of rational explanation.
Investigator Chase Klotsky says thousands of dedicated enthusiasts like Ryan are heating up the internet with talk that the buzzer's origin is the former Soviet Union.
We trace it back basically to Russia. Could be anything from a communication device to speak to submarines, or a coded way to speak to spies, their military.
There is another theory that the buzzer is part of a nuclear deterrent system, a so-called dead hand station.
The theory behind the dead man switch is that if Russia is attacked and decimated, the buzzer stops, and then nuclear weapons are automatically deployed in retaliation to the West.
The nuclear dead hand system is part of a long-standing policy called Mutual Assured Destruction, or MAD. If all sides know nuclear war is unwinnable, no one will start one. But is the buzzer really a part of that, or does it have another disturbing purpose? Let's ask the experts.
We turn to our military expert, Tim McMillan. He studied the history of the buzzer, and he's skeptical it has anything to do with nukes.
In 2010, the signal ceased. Very fortunately, we didn't see the launch of any missiles, we didn't see apocalypse, and so that would suggest that it's probably not linked to some type of nuclear detonation device.
So, what about the submarine signaling theory?
When I first heard about this buzzer, I thought it must be a way to communicate with submarines deep in the oceans, but that requires very low frequency transmission.
ELF, or extremely low frequency waves, can penetrate seawater hundreds of meters deep. At these frequencies, the signal doesn't degrade much due to atmospheric conditions or the depth of the ocean. But Kaku says the buzzer works at a much higher frequency. So he thinks it's being used to communicate with people on land, but at a great distance.
You might say to yourself, well, why don't the Russians simply use the internet? Well, the problem with that is security. And so you want to use over-the-horizon radio for certain kinds of sensitive communication.
Shortwave radio is phenomenally good at sending messages past the line of sight because these messages actually bounce off the ionosphere and then come back down to Earth. So you could shoot messages across entire continents. These regular intervals of noise, they're basically saturating this shortwave radio channel so other people can't hop on the station and compete with you.
But why do that? Dr. Gottesman says that by claiming the frequency, Russia can use it at any time as a so-called numbers station to send secret messages, often hidden in a group of numbers as they are read out loud. And McMillan agrees.
It's fairly unsophisticated, but a brilliant way to communicate with your deep cover spies who may be all the way across the world.
Other countries, including the US, have allegedly used so-called numbers stations for espionage. And if it's an old-school form of spycraft, McMillan says it's still useful.
The idea of continuing to use it today, why not? It makes your adversaries have to listen in. It makes them try to crack a code that maybe you're not even using anymore. But it could be something else that we haven't even considered. It's an unknown. Who knows? If nothing else, it's a mystery.
So our verdict is mixed. We're pretty sure it's a Russian number station, but we don't know exactly what sort of messages it's sending, if it's currently in use, or if it's a ruse, or if it's just a placeholder for the frequency. So for now, we're just gonna have to keep listening with anticipation for the next big clue. One rumor that continuously makes the rounds on the internet is that some controversial world leaders have been secretly replaced by body doubles. So is the camera just catching these powerful men from odd angles, or has somebody made a switch?
It's April 2020, and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un seems to be missing in action. On April 11th, he presides over a meeting of the North Korean Politburo, but he is conspicuously absent from the annual celebration of his grandfather's birthday just 4 days later on April 15th. As the weeks go by without a public appearance, there are whisperings that he is gravely ill. When photos of him are finally released at the beginning of May, it only intensifies rumors something had happened. The images show Kim inspecting a new fertilizer plant. He appears to be happy and healthy, but some speculate that all is not as it seems. The skeptics question whether the man in the photo is actually Kim Jong-un at all. They point to discrepancies in the man's head shape, nose, ears, and teeth compared to the authenticated photos of Kim in 2019 and 2013 on the right. Many wonder if the leader did in fact pass away and has been replaced by a double. According to journalist Aaron McCarthy, Kim Jong-un isn't the only world leader suspected of being swapped for a decoy.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has often been the subject of rumors that he uses body doubles. It was even rumored that at some point after he became president, he died and was replaced by a look-alike.
Sounds silly, right? But wait, major world leaders have used body doubles before.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has actually admitted to having impersonators who go on the campaign trail for him.
It's also been well established by the Pentagon that Iraq's Saddam Hussein went so far as to make his own body doubles get plastic surgery to add similar identifying marks like moles and scars. But could one of these current leaders have actually been replaced by a double? Time for our experts to face off.
First, facial recognition expert Juan Tan Tat has his company's algorithm compare the photo in question of the resurfaced Kim Jong-un to an earlier image of the North Korean leader. Again, look at the differences in the teeth and earlobes.
Comparing the two faces, and the lower the number, the better it is. If it's under 1.0, it's a match. This is at 0.73, so the algorithm is very confident that it's the same person. But to make sure, we had an expert facial analyst take a look at the face.
He found several features that were the same, like the outer eye and the lower lip area. But it was a matching crease in the cheek that really sealed the deal.
There are unique things that we don't always notice about someone, like the cheek crease. You have the cheek crease on his right cheek. To have a body double to have the exact same feature there would be very, very improbable.
So it's highly unlikely this was a decoy Kim Jong-un in the photo. The analyst also found matching cheek creases on the two photos of Putin, putting to bed rumors he too was replaced by a body double. Mick West says there's a logical reason why these theories of leaders being replaced with lookalikes have persisted online.
Even if you take the same person and you do two photographs in slightly different lighting, they can look like very, very different people.
West demonstrated for us exactly that.
These were taken about 1 minute apart. If you didn't know better, you might think these were actually two different people. The shape of the head becomes very, very different, and the features look a little bit different as well, like they're a little bit more compressed than they were over here.
Our verdict? These theories are false. Though body doubles have been used, we can conclude that there is still only one true Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. In the wake of the recent California wildfires, a strange and sinister theory emerged from the ashes. The video you're about to see had some folks asking if the terrifying natural destruction we observed was in fact unnatural.
Pretty much total destruction. I've seen every house destroyed on this road.
California wildfires have become a perennial disaster. In the aftermath, aerial footage shows wrenching images of destruction.
Here we see the devastating after effects of what these wildfires are leaving in their wake.
But look closely at this shot. Does something seem off to you?
One of the things that we're seeing that is absolutely crazy are entire houses incinerated, burned to the ground, while trees surrounding them are completely left intact, untouched. The question is, what is causing these wildfires?
Let's zoom in on that. It does seem odd that the trees are standing while the houses are reduced to ash. Journalist MJ Banaya says images like these have prompted some wild explanations that are getting attention online.
According to internet conspiracy theories, there's a secret government program known as Agenda 21, the purpose of which is to force people to relocate into major cities. And then, as the conspiracy theory goes, the government can then exercise more control over the population.
And how is this allegedly being accomplished? Forest fires and laser guns.
The theory is that the US government was using direct energy weapons to purposefully start these forest fires to clear out towns or for some other nefarious reason.
Laser weapons are much more than staples of science fiction. During the Cold War, the US and USSR poured resources into orbital space weapons, even deploying some. The so-called Star Wars missile defense system was the most famous, but perhaps the most intriguing was the Air Force's YAL-1, which featured a laser system mounted in a turret on a plane's nose. And that's just the technology we know about.
As you know, the U.S. military did just launch Space Force. But could the government really be using secret energy weapons to start fires and control society? We turn to our military expert, Tim McMillan, for an explanation.
The idea of directed energy weapons. It's very exciting. I mean, we've heard about that since Star Trek.
Tim says it's true that the major space powers are all developing energy weapons to take out each other's satellites. But striking the Earth's surface?
That is something that's very difficult to achieve and not technically, that we know of, achievable. Whenever the laser is being projected down, it's got to travel through the atmosphere, clouds. Any one of these factors are going to cause what's called atmospheric blooming. And by the time it reaches Earth, it's not going to have the amount of energy to start a fire and burn something.
So if a laser weapon is not possible, then what can account for the strange aftermath footage? Science writer Mick West, who lives in wildfire country, says it's simple. Houses burn much easier than trees.
It's actually quite hard to burn green wood.
To demonstrate, West decides to do his own test.
I went into my attic and I got a piece of scrap wood. Then I went out into the field behind my house and I cut down a branch of a tree. And then I took both of these pieces of wood and I put them in my fire and I built identical piles of kindling under each one. And then I lit them both at the same time. The wood from my attic caught fire and burned partway through. The wood that I just cut from a tree just got a bit black on the outside, just got a bit sooty, even though they had the exact same small fires underneath. which shows that green wood doesn't burn, but the wood in your house does.
In fact, the average live tree is about 50% water by weight. And while theories about directed energy weapons aren't going to go away anytime soon, that fact leads us to our unequivocal verdict. These fires are natural phenomena. Are audio waves secretly being used as weapons? That's the question a growing group of American diplomats, spies, and government employees are asking after falling ill in Cuba and elsewhere. They believe they are victims of covert attacks perpetrated by unknown assailants using unknown technology.
In late 2016, several diplomats and other employees stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba, report feeling ill after hearing a strange, high-pitched noise. According to the Associated Press, this recording could be that noise. The sound is a high-pitched whine that seems to undulate, even writhe, which produces a nails-on-the-chalkboard effect. Similar attacks are later reported by U.S. officials in China, Austria, and Russia. Mark Polymeropoulos, a senior CIA official, believes he was targeted one night while on official business in Moscow.
This was by far the most terrifying experience. The room was spinning. I couldn't stand up without falling down. I felt nauseous. I had an incredible case of tinnitus, ringing in my ears, a headache, so I knew something was seriously wrong.
The sudden onset of peculiar side effects baffles U.S. officials. Studies later show the injuries resemble a concussion, but with no signs of impact.
Not only were we subject to an attack, but I think it's still ongoing. And that poses a lot of serious questions for the U.S. government.
What was believed was going on at the time was diplomats were believing they were attacked by some sort of sonic weapon. Eventually, this is named Havana syndrome.
If the Havana syndrome is caused by some sort of sonic weapon, it wouldn't be the first time that sound has been weaponized.
This is something that goes far back in a more rudimentary form, using blaring loud music in different war zones. Now, as technology has advanced, there's been a lot of different hypothetical and actual practical operational platforms that use sound as a weapon.
The sonic weapon most commonly deployed today is the long-range acoustic device, which has been recently used by police departments to break up major protests and riots.
The LRAD system was designed for crowd dispersal in a non-lethal way.
These kind of weapons are only advancing, but sound is being weaponized more and more.
So folks, this is scary stuff and very real. What is that sound? Recorded in Havana. Did it make U.S. personnel sick? Or was there some other weapon or force responsible? Let's ask our experts.
Is the sound a recording of a sonic weapon? We asked our audio expert, Dr. Ben Gottesman.
You can see most of the energy is concentrated between 2 and 3 kilohertz. This is a really sensitive spot when it comes to human hearing. It's why baby cries grab our attention so much. Whereas in the sound released by the Associated Press, we see that the frequency range is much higher, between 6 and 8 kilohertz. And so the frequency ranges of these two sounds do not line up.
But could this sound be some other sonic weapon? Gottesman has his doubts.
And I've worked in some tropical locations, and there were times where I would hear very similar piercing calls. This sound is produced by a species of tropical cricket called the Indies short-tailed cricket. As you can see, the frequency range is a perfect overlap, and it also has similar harmonic characteristics. So I'm saying that it is a really clean match.
So the sound is just chirping crickets, coincidentally recorded at the moment people were getting sick. So, could Havana syndrome have been caused by a different kind of weapon, when people can't hear?
In the medical studies that have been done, including the National Academy of Sciences report, a microwave weapon is the leading culprit right now. And that's based on the injuries that have been observed in different patients.
Way back in 1962, an American scientist, Alan Fry, suggested a microwave weapon could be used to raise the temperature inside a person's ear by a millionth of a degree. That would be enough to cause a victim to feel dizzy, nauseous, or experience pressure in their heads. And get this, Fry later lectured on the topic to the Soviet Academy of Sciences in Moscow. So could the Russians be behind some new technology?
While the injuries are consistent with exposure to microwave weapons, it's important to know that these type of weapons are unknown to exist. So frankly, it really is a mystery. There's enough physical and medical evidence that it does appear to be a weapon, but what is causing it is truly an unknown. It's a real concern.
It's a split decision. Our verdict? The sound that was alleged to have caused the Havana syndrome is an Indies short-tailed cricket, coincidentally making that noise at the same time as the attack. But Havana syndrome itself is still an unexplained phenomenon. More than 130 U.S. officials have now been stricken. Recent incidents have even involved White House officials in our own nation's capital.